Hey everyone, I'm Fox 35 Storm Team meteorologist Jessica Dobson, and I wanted to bring you the latest update regarding the tropics because we are watching what will soon be Tropical Storm Ernesto, which could form into Hurricane Ernesto before the week's all said and done with. Right now, it's essentially just a cluster of showers and storms, and it's going to be developing more so as we head over the next 24 to 36 hours. But this is where the storm is right now in particular, so we're going to be watching it. It is moving at a very fast rate. This is actually quite fast, even just by tropic standards, because it's moving at a rate of around 26 miles per hour. Normally with any just standard tropical system, we're talking speeds closer to around 10 to 15 miles per hour, and even that's a little on the quick side. So that's why it's still a tropical depression. It hasn't really formed and organized too much because it hasn't had the chance to, because it's just moving so quickly. It does have winds around 35 miles per hour, so that has increased a bit since earlier today, and this is the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center as of about 11 a.m. this morning. There are some tropical storm watches and warnings in place specifically for parts of Puerto Rico and parts of the Leeward and Windward Islands, so that's going to be something we continue to keep a close eye on. But let's talk about the path, though. This is, again, future Ernesto, and it's going to be working its way close to Puerto Rico. This is going to be by about Tuesday night and Wednesday morning, likely impacting that area as a tropical storm. It will, though, strengthen back into a hurricane, Category 1 hurricane at that, as of around Thursday morning. Eventually, though, it will become a Category 2 hurricane before it continues to shift and move its way further to the north. You'll notice also it is going to be well away from the shore in the east coast of the United States. So obviously, still want to make sure everyone's being safe in Puerto Rico, making sure you have those disaster plans in place just in case, any sort of, whatever might take place in terms of emergencies, you are going to be prepared for that. So make sure those hurricane kits are good to go. Make sure you charge your devices over the next couple of days, because again, by about Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, that's when the worst of the impacts, which as of right now looks like it's going to be a tropical storm with some gusty winds, heavy rain. That's going to be the likely impacts to Puerto Rico before it eventually strengthens into a Category 2 hurricane. Now we have some very warm ocean waters over this region in particular, so that could mean it could strengthen even more so, potentially into a Category 3 storm. But as of right now, it's going to be staying well offshore of the east coast of the United States. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean we won't see impacts to the United States, and we'll touch base on that in a moment, but I do want to talk about our spaghetti models because you might have seen this thrown around social media or online. And essentially what meteorologists use these for is to help us gauge our confidence level. And these are just a number of models, and we kind of call it jokingly a plate of spaghetti because it looks like strings of spaghetti, right? But this is what helps us to kind of generally determine the path that this storm might take. And if we see a lot of these lines moving in the general same direction, that gives us a pretty good idea that we're growing more confident in the direction of the storm. So this one in particular, we're pretty confident. That means the lines are fairly close together. We do have a couple of outliers, but when it comes to just looking at maps like this in particular, there usually will be outliers. So that's something to keep in mind as well. But again, you'll see just how far north it goes. Pretty much all of our models take it all the way almost due north as we head over the next couple of days. And that will be due to a trough helping to push it offshore and keep it offshore of the United States. So that's going to be doing us some favors as far as the United States is concerned, helping to keep it, over open waters as well, with the exception of Puerto Rico and possibly Bermuda as well. But let's talk about what's to come in terms of wave height. So I mentioned the types of impacts we could expect here in Central Florida, and this is going to also be true for much of the East Coast, especially from the Carolinas down to Georgia and the Florida coastline. And this is especially what we might feel in terms of impacts. So this is going to be essentially the core of the storm. It's going to gradually move its way further to the north and west. As it does so, it takes that gradual turn. Now, closer to the storm, you're talking wave heights as high as around 20 feet. Right? So hopefully no one has any sort of plans on cruising out or taking a boat over parts of the eastern and central or western and central Atlantic, because that's going to be a rough go of things, right? But closer to the east coast, about 6 to 7 foot height waves are going to be possible just offshore. So that could mean we have breakers as high as around 5 to 7 feet. So something to keep in mind, especially as you're making your weekend beach plans, because as of right now, it looks like the majority of our impacts will be arriving Thursday and Friday. We have a high risk of rip currents. That's going to be essentially for all of our East Coast beaches. That's really important to keep in mind. If you find yourself in a rip current, you want to make sure you're not trying to fight the rip current, swim parallel to the shore until you can signal and call for safety. You just make sure you are swimming with other people close to a lifeguard stand. If you've been to the beach, you know, it's really important you keep that in mind, and also keep a close eye on the flags too. They always have them posted on the beaches. When it comes to rough surf, again, I mentioned the 5 to 7 foot breakers. So if you're a surfer, that might be good news for you, but otherwise for most folks out there, especially if you're not the strongest swimmer, it's really important to be careful of that. All right, let's talk about though, in terms of our hurricane season, just generally speaking, because we're a little over, the hurricane season officially started in June, and we're now into about almost mid-August now, and we're right here. We're just now approaching the peak of hurricane season. We haven't even hit it yet. This is the peak of hurricane season, about a month away, almost a month to be exact, in September. Now that doesn't mean that's exactly when our peak will take place for this year in particular. This is just looking at it statistically. When it comes to the different colors you see here, that's going to mean named storms, so things like tropical storms, things that aren't quite a hurricane. But then when you have the reds here, you'll notice it's still the general same trend, but hurricanes, we usually have fewer hurricanes. So that's why we have more named storms than hurricanes. So that's what those two numbers represent. Lastly, I do want to talk about the names on the list, because at this rate, it looks likely that we are going to be making our way through the entire list. At least that's the way the forecast stands from both the National Hurricane Center, also from the CSU hurricane forecast. They are experts at forecasting hurricanes, and they issue their updates. You know, sometimes they issue them repeatedly every couple of months, depending on how the season's playing out. But as of right now, it looks likely that whether or not they're tropical storms, hurricanes, major hurricanes, we're likely going to make it all the way down to William. But Ernesto, that's the next name on the list, followed by Francine, and then Gordon. That will take place, you know, potentially as we get closer towards the next couple of weeks. We have much more in the way of tropical waves that are still rolling off the west coast of Africa. So you just need to make sure that you are staying weather aware and have ways to receive weather alerts, weather warnings. That goes for just any given day, especially here in Central Florida, where we see lots of severe storms that are pretty common and typical this time of year. But also when it comes to hurricane forecasting, make sure, or hurricane coverage, and just making sure you're prepared. Make sure you have those plans in place, and it's better to plan early and then wait until the last minute. But that is the latest with Ernesto. Stay with Fox 35 for the latest.